This is Bulletproof, where Hollywood scandals meet real detective work. I'm Steve Stanulis, former NYPD officer, celebrity bodyguard, and private investigator. Unlike other true crime podcasts, these aren't cold cases. These are active celebrity crime investigations happening right now. From Diddy's inner circle to A-list scandals. I've been there, and I'm exposing the celebrity secrets you've never heard. Welcome to another episode of Bulletproof. My name is Steve Stanulis, and we have another amazing guest on today. I'm excited about this one because it's one of my favorite cases of all time. One of the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest botched cases of all time. But I have an expert here today that we're going to get her take. We have Paula Woodward, who's an investigative reporter and author of Unsolved, the JonBenét Ramsey murder 25 years later, which, again, is mind-boggling. But, Paula, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining the show.
Hey, I'm doing great. Glad to be with you. You've got a great podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And what I wanted to do, Paula, before we get into the whole JonBenét case, is obviously you're from that area. What drew you to that case?
Well, it was during the Christmas and New Year week off time where everybody who has any seniority at all takes off. And so I was on vacation. And it was the day after Christmas on a Thursday. And I was called by my news director, and she said, "We've got a kidnapped child." At that point, that's what it was. "And we need you to start making calls." And I had good contacts in Boulder with Boulder Police, even though they are isolated. And then I had good calls with, good relationships with Denver Police, who was going to be called in on it. And then her body was found. I was right in the middle of making calls, and I could not reach anybody, which was very unusual for cops not to be able to reach them. And the next day I started reporting on it, could not reach anybody from the Ramsey family. Nobody really knew them well. And it started out a mess, and it remained to this day a mess.
Well, let me ask you a question before we get into the whole structure of the case, because I have so many questions. What was your take of the Boulder Police prior? I mean, were they known to have botched cases before, or been unorthodox in how they do their investigations, or was this just like a exception?
It was not an exception, but they also were not a clumsy police department. They just didn't handle real serious cases. They had no homicide department. And
wow.
Yeah, and because they had no homicides. And
right.
None of the investigators on the case had any homicide experience. I mean, any homicide experience. And you've got to bring somebody in at that point. Denver Police offered to help them. Aurora Police offered to help them. And I found this out because we just have great resources there. And the Boulder Police chief said, "We don't need any help." And
now,
it was an average, to answer your question, it was an average police department. There had been one incident where a female cop was shot during a hostage situation, and that had a lot of questions around it. So not one of the great departments, but a decent department.
Sure. And again, you could always write that off because
sure.
Listen, you have one homicide a year. Obviously you're not going to have that type of experience. But like I said, I'm surprised right off the bat because I didn't know that. I didn't know that Denver, who I would think is a much more experienced department or has much more resources, reached out and they were turned down. I'm surprised about that.
And the chief told me that. I walked in his
wow.
office and said, "What's new with this?" And he goes, "We just offered our help." And they said, "What for?" And he said, "What's going on there?" Now, the Boulder Police chief said, "What for?" And he said, "What am I missing here?"
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Totally out of touch.
Oh, man. That is out of touch. So with that being said, now I have a whole bunch of questions, and you can actually confirm, deny. So just going. I wrote a whole list of stuff. So, and you tell me your thoughts. What first comes to your mind when you hear all this? So, with the ransom note, right?
Right.
They wanted $118,000 allegedly for the ransom, which matched John Ramsey's yearly bonus,
which was similar to, didn't match.
Similar to.
Yeah.
It didn't match. Okay. So I read somewhere it had matched.
Well,
so
that's part of the problem.
Yeah,
all this
sorry.
erroneous information. We
Right.
were all.
Oh.
There's all this erroneous information that was distributed, including that the ransom note matched his bonus, and it wasn't true. They were just leaking deliberate, erroneous information.
Now, why do you think that is, Paula?
I don't know. I've never been able to figure it out. During some civil lawsuits, they blamed it on the FBI, said the FBI recommended it, but I don't know. It was very insidious. I traced like 3 months. I went to Vanderbilt University and traced 3 months of television stories. And as I was looking at it, it was like, wait a minute, this is way too planned and organized. And fortunately, I had a media background and I was very used to dealing with law enforcement, liked and respected them. And I started looking, and it was deliberate, incorrect information. So I started talking to the reporters on the story. Where'd you get this information? And these were not very good reporters who were filling in during this time off between Christmas and New Year's, and they didn't do a good job. They didn't second source, which is such a basic in life. And so it was, it was crazy. I mean, the first news conference they held, Boulder Police said that Patsy Ramsey did not give her DNA. Well, she had 2 days before. How basic is that? Everybody in the department is going to know that the whole family was brought in to give their DNA, including Patsy. Yet at the news conference, they said no, she hasn't given her DNA, and they haven't given any interviews. Well, they had given interviews as of the first day when her body was found, and it just continued on and on.
Well, now, before I go on, because now it's going to turn into what's factual and what's not, because now you're telling me some of this stuff is not.
Ransom note is what's great.
Right, but why do you think they were trying to cover this up? Was it because it was so high profile, or they just didn't know how to deal with something of this magnitude? Why all the false information?
Well, I think that you've hit on two of them. I've never been able to figure it out. Why do you continuously lie, which is such a harsh word, for 29 years? I mean, why continue on all this time when they deserve the benefit of the doubt, at least? I mean, look at the record. The record says their DNA doesn't match. The record says their handwriting doesn't match, both Patsy and John, and that the ransom note was written on a tablet of Patsy's, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was written in the house. You know, anybody could have taken that. I mean, she had like 6 or 7 tablets, and the autopsy says the cause of death is almost simultaneous garrote strangulation and the 8-inch blow to the head. So I interviewed the coroner, and he said, hey, I couldn't figure out which happened first and which happened last. So that automatically cuts out a couple of the police theories, which were Patsy got mad, hit JonBenét in the head, and then they did this strangulation cover-up 45 minutes later. No, it was simultaneous, according to the coroner.
Well, how about this now? Because again, what you said has me thinking maybe some of this is not factual. Was this factual? There was no forced entry, but a broken window in the basement, but there was no footprints in the snow that were led to this basement window to come inside. Was that factual? Was it?
That's all wrong.
That's all wrong. Really?
Want me to tell you?
Wow.
Oh,
yeah, please.
I mean, everybody. John Ramsey said, if a killer's found, if a killer confesses, people will still think we did it. And so your first one was when you were, no forced entry. There were 8 signs of forced entry. And the mayor of the little town of Boulder came out on the Thursday, a week after she was murdered, and said no signs of forced entry, which is what everybody picked up. But yet there were 8 signs: unlocked windows, doors that were ajar, a door that was open, the just, you know, I don't recall the rest of them. So there
Right.
were 8 signs of forced entry, which is one that really bothers police officers. The forced entry, that's the one that they bring up to me all the time. Well, what about this no signs of forced entry? But there were. And then no footprints in the snow. That was another one that was leaked to a
Right.
very. Denver is probably like a lot of other places, but the north side of your house can be completely covered in snow, but the south side isn't because we're up so high and the force of the sun. So no footprints in the snow. There was no snow on the south side of the house where the sidewalk was, and there was no snow on the sidewalk that led to the basement window where you could get in. So that's doesn't make. I mean, it was just such a lie. It
Wow.
just was, and that was leaked in March of
So
1997.
why do you think, Paula, then? Were they trying to set the parents up, or why all this disinformation?
I don't know. I don't. It doesn't make sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Right. Right. No, it doesn't, because
Well, it
again,
doesn't
so
either.
now you can debunk all right. So obviously, when the cops came, again, this is all what I've picked up. When the cops came, they treated it obviously as a
Kidnapping.
kidnapping. So obviously, there was friends of the family. There was the family, the cops walking around, and they were basically fucking the crime scene up, and um, obviously ruining the whole crime scene. So, was that something that happened, or was that again, was that nonsense?
No, the Ramseys, Patsy Ramsey called 911, and John Ramsey was reading the ransom note. Immediately after she called 911, one of them started calling family and friends to get them over to help them. Boulder
Right,
Police never said, "Hey, you can't do this." They didn't know that you couldn't have people in the crime scene, in that which
right,
was the house. They also didn't have an entry or exit log, which is, as you know, signing up when police officer arrives, you sign in. When the police officer leaves, you sign out, and you do that so that the detectives investigating have a good idea of who was there, how long they were there, and they can question them. So everybody leaves but one detective. One detective stays with the family during this critical time when the kidnappers may call back.
right,
And the kidnappers, well, at 1 o'clock or 1:05, the one detective said to John Ramsey, "Hey, why don't you search the house?" So he grabs a friend and they go to the basement. I said, "Why'd you go to the basement first?" And he said, "Because you can get into the basement. You can't get in upstairs, but you can easily downstairs." So he went to the basement and he went almost directly to straight ahead. When you come down the stairs, there's a turn and it faces that door, which is 15 feet away. And so he went straight to the door it was a cold storage room was what it was when the house was first built. And he opened the door and there was JonBenét's body. Stiff from rigor mortis, tape covered her mouth, rope wrapped her hands, and her arms were up in the air from the rigor mortis. And he started screaming and he grabbed her body and ran upstairs. And he was criticized for grabbing her body. Well, as he said, I don't know anything about crime scenes. Nothing.
right.
So you would understand that as a police officer. So what was your original question? I'm sorry, Steve.
No, no, no,
Or
no.
did I
I
answer it?
love how
Yeah.
I love no, no, I love how passionate. I was saying, what when we were originally talking about the crime scene, everybody was coming in and out, and
Oh,
obviously they ruined the whole crime scene by letting that
here,
happen.
let me just interject here. So the police were called and they were meeting with the FBI at the police station when her body was found. And they all came running back where this and the where the only law enforcement was this one detective. When they came back, there were 18 people in the house who were non-law enforcement, who were friends, family, minister, victims, advocates. So, I mean, they had been cleaning up and puttering around and making food, and you know what that does to a crime scene.
Sure.
You're a cop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's 101, believe it or not. But so again, now, I'm just taking through this timeline, and I might be jumping So now a lot of attention. Again, this is all from Google, ChatGPT, all this stuff. And this is as soon as now, when I even asked ChatGPT, hey, give me some facts, unknown facts. These are the facts I got. So it said that the ransom letter was not only like a war and peace type huge,
right,
something that's not normal in a ransom letter. It had some innuendos on some stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Because the letter almost implied, again, that they kind of had some sort of personal connection with JonBenét.
The ransom note was really bizarre. I mean, it's 2.5 pages, block printing, right. About 372 words. Never in the ransom note is her name mentioned. Never in there does it say JonBenét. Never in there is there any swearing. You would think that there would be swearing. I mean, I looked up ransom notes, history of ransom notes. A lot of them have curse words in them. But there are some really bizarre references. How many people do you suppose know what fat cat means? You and I know what fat cat means, probably.
Right.
But so don't try to be a fat cat. Okay, what does that mean? And then attaché. I mean, just these bizarre little things. The ransom note says, listen carefully. When you say read carefully, as opposed to listen carefully, you say read carefully. Well, then 2 detectives outside of Boulder Police, one from the Boulder Sheriff's Department who had extensive homicide experience, and then one who was hired by Boulder Police and the Boulder DA because he also had extensive homicide experience, came in from Colorado Springs. They came up with a theory that there were 5 kidnap movies, like Dirty Harry and the movie Ransom, that had phrasing in them that was similar to the ransom note, which would mean somebody was watching these movies and picked up some of the phrasing when it involved kidnapping and the ransom note, like, listen carefully. Don't try to grow a brain, John. That was Speed. Remember the movie Speed?
Yeah, sure.
Keanu Reeves?
Sure.
Remember that when he says, don't try to grow a brain? Yeah.
Sure.
And because it was such an odd thing, that's included in this ransom note. So just, and it's almost taunting. The ransom note is almost try to catch me if you can. I mean, there's that feel of it in there. It feels younger. It feels as though a younger person wrote it. It feels as though somebody's copying phrases like, don't try to be a fat cat. At the very end of the...
If you would have said, I have a very special set of skills and I will find you, then I would have, no, I'm kidding. I'm playing around, but...
No, at the very end it says, the only real reference to them is use that old-fashioned Southern common sense of yours. John was not Southern.
Right.
John was from Michigan. Patsy was Southern. And so it is the most bizarre note. And it was written on it. Patsy made a lot of notes to John and notes on everything on tablets. And there were probably 5 or 6 in the house. So the ransom note was written on one of those tablets. That tablet could have easily been missing and Patsy wouldn't have known it. And so what comes out is, from the police leaks, the ransom note was written in the house. Well, who knows that? Nobody knows it was written in the house. You know that it was written on that tablet that belongs to the Ramseys, but you don't know if it was written in the house.
But again, and I want to move. I want to move on. But
Sure.
again, who would have that audacity to get her tablet and write something that's over 350 words? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't that a little odd? Would you be
Sure. The whole thing is odd.
The whole thing is odd, but
I mean,
yeah. So obviously, again, everything always pointed back to, and again, whether it's media, whether it's always made it look like it was the parents, it was the mother and the father. But I also read and looked into this. Now, the senior investigator resigned 2 times, right? Because he was very pro that the Ramseys were innocent.
Oh,
and the case was mishandled.
The Lou Smith guy that was hired from Colorado Springs?
Yes.
He resigned once, but he continued working on the case. And when the grand jury was held by Boulder Police, he was told that he would not be allowed to testify before the grand jury. And he believed the parents were innocent. Huge, long homicide experience guy. And he also had to go to court because they went to court saying he could not testify, which is just so bizarre before the grand jury. So he goes to court and says, I want to testify before the grand jury. The judge says, fine. And then Patsy and John, through their attorneys, volunteered to appear before the grand jury. The grand jury is about them. They were never called.
It's bizarre. It's almost like it's almost like a cover up, which is why would a little girl? I mean, it almost looks like like there was more behind it. And I don't know if it's because they botched it so badly, or it just, again, the whole thing is mind-boggling to this day, which is why it's so interesting, and we're talking about it. And again, now it's not even 20; it's about 27 years later, and
it's going to be 30 this year.
30. Oh my God!
This year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I was just getting on the police department, believe it or not, when this was going on. So. Yeah, so that's why it was always
fascinating.
Wow, it was fast. Yes. So moving forward now, only because they allow me a certain amount of time, and I want to get everything in.
Sure.
Now, Chris Wolf. Now he had a sweatshirt or something that had the SBTC, and it was the same initials that were on the ransom note. Is that factual, or was that just leaked?
When I said, because I wrote 2 books on the case, and I concentrated on the investigation. I didn't concentrate on who might be the killer because I didn't have enough information. I didn't have the powers that the police had, and I thought it was kind of a fool's errand for me trying to figure out who the killer was. So I know a little about Chris Wolf, but not much.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough answer. Now, here's another thing I think is odd. Now, there was a suspect who was the prime suspect, and his name escapes me right now. But as he found out that, again, allegedly found out that as they were moving in on him, there was a gun wound to his head, but it didn't match. The gun wound didn't match if he would have done it to himself. Are you familiar with any of that stuff?
No.
No. Okay. Again, this is stuff.
But I don't know what it is. I've never heard of that.
You never heard of that, huh?
Is this the one that supposedly killed himself on Valentine's Day?
Yes.
Michael. I'll think of the name in a minute. That information is not something that I learned, and I knew a little bit about him. That's not something that I heard about. Anything about the gun.
And again, that's fine, because again, you're doing your job about the case. You weren't Sherlock Holmes on this. You weren't trying to. So I get it. I'm just, like I said, I just had a whole bunch of things I found interesting, and I jotted down the stuff that I found. Wow. Right. Officer Richard French. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He described Patsy to be very off. Again, see, now, when you're telling me the day, you find out your daughter is missing, whether at this point in time it was a kidnapping, I don't know if I'd be very with it myself. So for him to make that remark that Patsy was being very phony and not forthcoming.
And Richard French was the first police officer on the scene.
Yes, that is correct.
And he was the one who was supposed to check the basement. And he said he checked the basement, but he did not find her body.
Right.
So did he check the basement? You know, there's another question for you. But he also said in another police report that he thought that both parents were acting appropriately. So it's like, what? Which one?
Right. It's hearsay. Right.
Well, no, they're both in police reports, and I guess it is hearsay. But that's what he was saying. And then he said that the reason that he didn't check the basement door behind which her body was because he was looking for a way out of the home. Does that make any sense to you?
No.
Not at all. You don't know what's behind the door until you open the door.
Right.
See if it's a way out of the house. So, I mean, it's all bizarre stuff. Was he in the basement? Did he ever search the basement?
Right. I knowing from what, again, the very little I know about the police department there, everything I'm reading, what he probably did is he went down, knowing some guys that I know in the NYPD myself, he probably went down, looked around, did the minimum, and walked back upstairs. You know what I mean? That's probably what happened, not realizing they were going to find a body down there.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what he did? Only he knows.
What, was there anything more implicated with that? Or did he get any reprimanding with that? Or just kind of...
About 2 weeks after the crime, or after she was tortured and murdered, they had senior officers call in all the first responders and go over their statements, which is totally unusual. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'm sure that you don't even know of a case that happened with your department. This had never happened before. And there were no reprimands. There were no suspensions. Nothing. The Boulder Police chief called a group of, he allowed newspaper reporters in, no TV reporters in, and he said, everybody we've talked to said we did it just right. And it's like, are you crazy?
Right.
I mean,
right.
You can't say that. The reason that I decided to finally sit down, retire from local news and sit down and write these books was because I was trying to figure out, was there some deal made behind closed doors or what happened in that investigation? And that's when I found out all this incredible stuff.
Well, wasn't there DNA found on her body?
Yes.
That you had mentioned earlier, I believe. And it was never really released to the public.
Right.
And again, I'm sorry.
DNA under her fingernails on both hands.
Right.
And DNA in her underwear. That was submitted, I believe, on December 31st of 1996. And when she was murdered the day after Christmas in 96. And then it was returned on January 15th, 1997, which was 15 days. Usually DNA leaks. I mean, it's just one of the leaks that happen with police, and it's usually helpful. That never leaked. As a matter of fact, because it eliminated the Ramseys. But the police department didn't like the DA's office. The DA's office didn't like the police department, so they didn't tell the DA's office that the DNA was back. And here were the results of it. But also, you got to fault the district attorney who had been in office for 28 years. There were no term limits, so there were problems there. The DA's office had not asked for the results of the DNA, which would be just a no-brainer to be hounding to find out the results of the DNA. So it was just this layer upon layer of incompetence. And so now they hate each other even more and don't trust each other anymore, which is not going to help the case. Neither one of them knew what they were doing.
It's crazy. So
sad.
It's sad. It's tragic. It's ridiculous. It's a
Yes.
calamity. And no, so what I'm saying is, once you got the DNA, that's a Yahtzee.
Yeah.
You figured it. So again, every which way, it was a shafting, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, and there, you have Patsy and John were in the house. So that makes them the first highest profile suspects. Then you have that the ransom note was written on Patsy's tablet. Okay, what other evidence is there? There really isn't any other evidence, because the DNA leads away from them, the autopsy leads away from them, the handwriting leads away from them.
Right.
The ransom note,
Right.
and the words in the ransom note. How do you come up with those kind of words? I mean,
Right.
they're almost silly because they're
But you know
so
what, Paula?
copied.
You're 100% right in everything you just said, but you'd even have to go that far. Once you got the DNA, that was it. You know what I mean? I mean, that's it. I mean, that's what you need.
And Steve,
Everything else was just a bonus.
And Steve, one of the things about the DNA, people will say, "Oh, that DNA is no good." So the Colorado Bureau of Investigation did the first test. Then Boulder Police didn't like that result, so they asked for another organization to test it. That organization did 2 months later, and they came back with the same result as the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Then 12 years later, the new district attorney did a new touch DNA test on long johns that had never been tested before, thinking on the waistband of them that they could have been pulled down. And in 3 areas, new DNA was found that absolutely matched the DNA found under her fingernails and in her underpants. So if you're going to question the DNA, you've got to say, well, geez, look at these places that it's been tested. And then I ran some DNA tests, as many as I could find, and there are still, if those are all the DNA tests, 17 crime scene items that have never been tested for DNA.
It's crazy. That's crazy. Again, the whole thing, it's mind-boggling, and it's almost like, again, it's like a huge cover-up, and I don't know why. But let me ask you a question. Well, let me ask one question, and then I'll close with that question. But are you friendly with the parents or not?
Yes. She has died.
She has died.
She died of cancer in 2006.
And what about the dad?
That was in Atlanta, and she had ovarian cancer. She had that ovarian cancer, when JonBenét was murdered. She'd had it for like 3 years. So JonBenét and Burke grew up with a very sick mom. But she was, from what everybody described, a great mom. And that was her purpose in life, being a good mom.
So if I could ask Paula what her theory is on what happened, do you have one?
No, I don't. I don't believe the Ramseys killed their daughter. If they did, and you can prove it, then I'll be the first one to say I'm wrong. I've never been able to imagine who a killer might be. The closest I have come is the creep in Idaho who killed the 4 students, confessed to it, because he was young. He knew a little bit about law enforcement. He was cocky. He was almost like, catch me if you can. You know, he shows the thumbs up on his cell phone. To me, that's the closest I could come to the type of person that it might be. And currently, the minuscule amount of DNA that they have, the 17 items of crime scene evidence that are partially tested or not tested at all, have not been taken to a lab. And that's what needs to be done, because that genealogy tracing could find the killer.
Okay. And why do you think they refuse to do that?
I don't know. I've never known, Steve, why they've done most of what they have done. I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like, at this point in time, some hotshot uh, you know, coming into office or whatever, almost like, not, I mean, usually this is a bad example, but comes in and says, I'm going to tell you who killed Kennedy. I'm going to tell you about the Epstein files. I'm going to tell you about, I'm surprised somebody doesn't go into office there and says, I'm going to find out who, I'm going to close this case with JonBenét. I'm surprised that hasn't happened. You know what I mean? There's enough time that has passed.
In Colorado, there are enough people in high-level offices who still believe that Patsy Ramsey killed her daughter that the case just doesn't move ahead. There are too many hands on it, I think.
Again, it's fascinating. I'm so glad that you and I got to speak today, because if I had 10 cases since 1994 when I became a cop that fascinate me, this was one of them. So when I obviously did some research and I saw the book, I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? I was, I was excited to speak to you, and I'm glad I did, because, it's from another perspective and not just reading stuff that, again, on what you hear on the media, on Google.
What do you think happened?
Man. See, you kind of changed my theory a little bit, because some stuff I didn't know. I didn't know about the snow. I didn't know about there was more than one broken window downstairs that was already broke. I didn't know. Obviously, I just thought there was no forced entry. There was no footprints in the snow. If that amount of damage was done with the torturing, I don't know how nobody heard that was going on. So I always thought, like everybody else, it was probably the mother. Maybe jealousy. I know she used to take a lot of credit for the trophies that she won. Again, from what I heard. So my theory has changed a little bit, because I didn't know any of this stuff. You know what I mean? I didn't know about the DNA. I didn't know about any of that. So I think something happened where, now this is off the cuff, I think something happened where it was botched. As far as the kill, I don't know. That's weird. That's wild. But I think they're so embarrassed, the police department, on what was done and what wasn't done, that they had to cover it up.
Interesting what you have to say, because you have a law enforcement background. And so you understand that cop think.
Yes. And like I said, but I didn't, you just blew my mind with all this other stuff, because I didn't know about all this other stuff. So now I have to rethink this a little more.
Read the first book. You have
I'm
my
going
daughter. You have your daughter, because that has tremendous factual information in it that stands up today.
That's amazing, and I absolutely will, and I'm going to reach out to you once I do. And again, Paul, before I let you go today, do you have any social media handles? Do you have anywhere where people can find you and reach out to you?
You can go to paulawoodward.net, which is my website, which will have a tremendous amount of information. And no, I've cut down on the social media because it was so hateful in the initial part. I was criticized for doing interviews with the Ramseys. Well, you have to do interviews with the Ramseys. They're the suspects. And so, right. I got real tired of the haters, so I withdrew. You can reach me at author Paula Woodward at gmail.com.
Awesome.
If you like
awesome. Well, Paula, thank you so much today for the insight. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to continue. I'd love to read the book and continue this at some point. And again, I'd like to thank Paula. I'd like to thank everybody at Believe, our sponsors, everybody listening. I'd like to thank everybody for, in such a short period of time, making us a top 10 podcast. And it's not because of people like me. It's because guests like Paula. Paula, thank you so much today for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
You took my words. This has been an absolute pleasure to talk to somebody like you. I really admire and respect you. Thank you.
And that's Bulletproof, your source for celebrity crime investigations. Subscribe for new episodes. Send celebrity scandal tips. Follow us on Instagram at Bulletproof True Crime Podcasts for exclusive content. This is Steve Stanulis. I'm keeping you bulletproof against all celebrity lies.